Hello and welcome to Sticky from the Inside, the employee engagement podcast that looks at how to build stickier, competition-smashing, consistently successful organisations from the inside out. I'm your host, Andy Goram, and I'm on a mission to help more businesses turn the lights on behind the eyes of their employees, light the fires within them, and create tons more success for everyone. This podcast is for all those who believe that's something worth going after and would like a little help and guidance in achieving that. Each episode, we dive into the topics that can help create what I call stickier businesses. The sort of businesses where people thrive and love to work, and where more customers stay with you and recommend you to others because they love what you do and why you do it. So, if you want to take the tricky out of being sticky, listen on. Okay, in good financial times, the idea of scaling up a business is an exciting prospect. Whether you started as an established small business and growth has spiked, or you're an entrepreneur of a startup that's seen rapid growth in the early years, the markets are busy, money's available for the right opportunity, and competition for the best talent is hot. Even with all that, it's not a sure thing. Even in something like the tech industry, a staggering 54% of scale-ups fail. So what's it like in a tougher market like we're in today? Even harder, right? Interestingly, though, research would say that the failure rate is not actually about the money in the main. It's about not having the right level of expertise to scale up effectively and enough talent and will in the workforce to sustain the pressures of hypergrowth. Forbes and Inc. magazine both say that building a great culture and team is one of, if not the biggest challenge scale-ups face. So, in a market like we have today, how can you scale successfully and maximize the power of the people to do that? Well, today I'm joined by Andrew Bartlow. With 25 years of human resources and talent management experience in many big and complex organizations, today Andrew helps businesses to articulate their people strategy and accelerate their growth whilst navigating rapid change. He's also the co-author of the book, Scaling for Success, People Priorities for High Growth Organizations. So he's the perfect partner to help us look at how to make the most of our people when scaling up a business successfully. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Andy.
How are you doing, my friend?
You know, we talked about me fighting COVID over the past week. So you may hear it in my voice a little bit, but hey, I'm really pleased to be here with you.
It's all good, my friend. I think pretty much all of us have been there. And if you haven't yet, it's coming to get you. And then we can kind of move on, I think. It's really nice to have you here today. Will you just do me a quick favor, Andrew? How about just introducing yourself with a bit more detail about what you do and what you're working on at the moment for the listeners, please?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I have a long career in human resources, 20 plus years in-house as the head of HR at companies from Fortune 50 to less than 50 employees. I had the top job 4 or 5, maybe 6 times, depending how you count it, with mergers and acquisitions thrown in there. Rode a rocket ship with a real estate tech company as they went public and had a little tiny piece of that. Pulled my golden parachute and hung my single shingle as a consultant a few years ago. Wrote my bucket list book, Scaling for Success, and now I work with other organizations and other HR leaders to help them be more successful. I have a career in both very large enterprise organizations as well as peer startups. Not a lot of people have that that experience on both sides of the fence, and I bring it together by really focusing on the human resources work, helping the people to be more effective.
I love that. It sounds like you're living the dream with the golden parachute and the rocket ship and the bucket list book. Amazing stuff. We will obviously reference the book as we go through today, but can I maybe ask you, a seemingly simple question? What inspired you to write that book in the first place, Andrew? What was it that thought, you know what, I need to write this book?
Well, I'd left the internal job, chief HR officer of a very large organization worth, I don't know, 14, $15 billion, depending where the market is today. And I had a lot of choices and was trying to figure out what to do with myself besides be a terrible stay-at-home dad for a while. Yeah, I was drinking too much wine, and I don't play golf, so I needed to find something to do with myself. And as I was evaluating, hey, what does the world need, and what do I know where I could contribute? I can work at a food kitchen, I can mow lawns, I could start gardening, or I could help other people that are struggling with the same things that I struggled with through my career and be useful. So that's where the book came from. It's just trying to share my school of hard knocks to help other people navigate a little bit more gracefully.
Brilliant. Although I've got to say, the law of a ride-on lawnmower. I mean, that's a thing, right? That's on my bucket list at some stage. Get myself a ride-on lawnmower and just ride off into the sunset. That'd be marvelous.
Send a photo, please.
Definitely, yeah. My friend, definitely. So look, the subject of scaling up, I mean, that's a grown-up topic for this podcast, right? And just so that we all follow the trail, you're the guy who's done this many times and knows what it's all about. When we're talking about scaling up, what are we referring to here? What are we really dealing with?
Sure. Well, let's define a couple of terms. Hypergrowth is thrown around wildly some days. I define hypergrowth as 50% headcount growth over a 12-month period.
Okay.
Lots of organizations, particularly venture-backed software startups, find themselves in a hypergrowth environment shortly after a funding round. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work with many startups, scale-ups, and growth equity platforms. And there's a lot of that activity happening out here as well as everywhere else. Boy, it's been amazing in the UK and Ireland and Austin, Texas, and you name it. It's no longer just Silicon Valley. Lots of organizations are having success even in this tighter marketplace. So again, scaling up is about growth. And for purposes of people issues, I think about that as headcount growth.
Nice and simple. And so I said in the intro about the sort of changing market and the landscape right now, and whether it throws in different challenges compared to like a bear market or something. What do you perceive the sort of challenges of the current marketplace for scaling up businesses?
Yeah, well, we're recording this episode on May 23rd of 2022. The markets here in the U.S. have been highly volatile, mostly trending down, sadly. And I've been monitoring technology company layoffs.
Right.
The list is long. We have very rapidly swung from this massive war for talent during the Great Resignation, Great Reshuffling, whatever you want to call it, to now we have quite a few skilled people that are looking for work. Hasn't significantly changed the unemployment rate among knowledge workers, but the market is shifting. And I'm sure that we'll get to this, but I think the formula for success isn't that different.
Okay.
Whether you're in good times or in bad.
Just maybe the competition for talent is different. Would you say that's the case, or not in your experience?
Yeah. No matter whether the market is raising all boats or whether it's making things tougher for everybody, there is elite talent that organizations compete for, and how to select those people and how to align them and ensure that they're working on the right things and keep them motivated and productive. Those are evergreen issues. Yeah.
The market doesn't really shape that. There's a rule of thumb, right? And maybe we should start to try and get into that when we think about whether it's good times or whether it's bad times. What is that formula then for success for scaling up from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that it's not rocket science. and it's not found on the latest Apple News article or HBR newsfeed. It's a focus back on the basics. It's being brilliant at the basics. And that means figure out what's important to your organization. What are you trying to accomplish? Communicate that repeatedly to your organization, and make sure that you're working on the most important things all the time. And that is just a very simple sort of, big rocks, Franklin Covey, concept of if you're leading people, then you need to provide clarity and a simple plan for those people to together get something done.
And if we start with that, focusing on brilliant basics, if we've got this stat in the background, and I don't know. Look, I've tried to do some research, but it's what you find on Google. So if it's reliable, we'll see. But it seemed to be fairly common statistic that 2% of startups get to IPO, right? That they get all the way through into an IPO, which that's a shocking statistic for me when I saw that. But if we think about those brilliant basics, that can't be happening all the time. Looking at failure rate that we talked about before, for even the tech stuff being about 54% or whatever. And then you've got this other shocking thing about getting to IPO being tiny percentages. Why are the brilliant basics not happening?
Well, I think that venture funding is like gasoline.
Okay.
Or rocket fuel. That's better said. Boy, it can help you go fast and far, but it's also highly explosive and really dangerous.
Okay.
So as you're taking funding for growth, you're accepting a burn rate usually, and that means that you're taking on more costs than revenue is coming in, and usually those costs in SaaS companies and software as a service companies is people. And so that is dangerous. You've got to figure stuff out pretty quickly as you're burning cash, and you've got to be able to raise again, assuming that you're not getting to profitability. And I think it's there's some danger in the idea of blitz scaling. Popular book came out a few years ago around double-sided marketplaces and this idea of a single winner, and you've got to make rapid traction to win in your space. That led, I think, quite a few organizations to take it too far or to apply it in their organization when it didn't really apply to them. And there's this overhang, and that's where we're seeing layoffs today, where organizations got out over their skis, hired too many people, got too aggressive, and now find themselves needing to trim back.
Yeah. I guess this stuff sort of comes in, I guess, in different sorts of categories, because in the different stages of growth, I guess there are very different people challenges, right? So that bit at the front about, I guess, even to secure the funding to go on, you need a certain amount of talent and a certain type of talent, right? I mean, that must be a challenge in its own, because the people that are going to help you secure the funding, they're, I guess, a commodity that people go after as well, right?
Well, you normally get your first round of funding due to your team and your TAM. So who's your founding team? Do investors have confidence that they know what they're doing and can create something valuable? And the TAM is total addressable market.
Okay.
So what's the potential ultimate size of this business? So you can get angel, seed, and even a healthy Series A. Boy, Series A's seem to be $5 to $10 million nowadays, with a team and a TAM. But beyond that, and I named my own consulting business Series B Consulting. That's not because my last name starts with B, Bartlow, but because the people issues start to get really interesting and complicated around Series B.
Okay.
So around Series B, you're typically seeing teams of 50 plus.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's no longer just the founding team and the people in their garage or their army of contractors. You have employees, you have layers, you have managers of managers, and that's where things get complex in an organization. It's around Series B, which coincides with around 50 people.
100%. This is I think I call it the frozen moment for me. This is about letting go. All right. This is the point at which distributed leadership comes in. And it's not you, the dude, making all the decisions and carrying the can the whole time. You're looking for others to kind of take that burden, right? So your challenges, and it's staggering actually when you think how you classed hypergrowth, 50% people growth in a 12-month period. I mean, that's big, right? I mean, that's noticeable change. That's people coming in every day or every week, new. And we know what it's like when you're trying to onboard people at a really simple cadence. But when people are coming on a constant stream, I mean, that must throw up its own different challenges. Your whole kind of onboarding strategy process must be way slicker than the normal, perhaps, at that point.
Yeah. Well, it certainly increases the attention on talent acquisition and on onboarding, and often makes organizations a little sloppy in their speed. And you can trade off your time, cost, and quality to an extent, right? So those are the three levers, and you can move really fast, but it's not necessarily going to be cheap and good. So you can get two out of the three.
Out of the three.
Can't get all of them. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I worked in marketing, my friend, but that was definitely something I would say to clients or departments that were asking me for stuff. Yeah, 100%. I know the triangle, and I guess at that point also you're deferring recruitment to other people, right? At that point of growth, you've probably done it yourself at that point.
Well, you need to.
Yeah.
Famous stories with Google. The founders of Google were still interviewing the first how many thousand hires.
Wow.
The recruiting team was preparing a CV for each candidate, and one of the founders had to sign off that this was a Googler. And they did that into the 4 digits.
That's incredible,
of their company. Yeah. And that's one of my key ideas that I talk about a lot, which is just because Google did that, and Google is a wildly successful organization, I wouldn't suggest that's a great practice that lots of other organizations should adopt, right? You could make an argument and say, oh, you need to have control over your talent, and you need to have deep assessment by the founders for all your critical first X number of hires. Well, I'd suggest that they may have succeeded because they have a great product or products, and in spite of an awkward people management practice.
And do you see that? Well, in your experience, how well have people coped with that leap of faith about that letting go period? You must have seen various kind of degrees of happiness with that letting go stuff.
Oh, not really.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
have not seen. I've not seen a great range, but I've seen a lot of consistency. That it is really damn hard.
Right.
Can I say that on?
You've said
a
it, and
podcast?
it's cool. It's cool with me, my friend.
All right, great. It's really hard for a founder CEO to delegate, to empower, to trust. Their organization is so deeply wrapped up in their identity and ego that it's scary. It's terrifying to have anybody else make a decision of consequence. And so I have just about invariably seen founders struggle to varying extents, but there's always some level of struggle with delegation, empowerment, and I guess it's letting go, but managing a larger, more dispersed organization.
And this is why I think this is an interesting topic for us, and I've referenced this guy before, but there was a piece of work done by Ranjay Gulati. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talked about the soul of a startup. And he talked about this, I guess, quandary that startup founders face, like you just said, their whole DNA is in this business. It's pretty much everything they're living and breathing. It's every waking hour that they're doing. And as the business gets bigger, they're relying on other people to kind of carry that message through. And yet the first thought for them isn't to hardwire and code this DNA. It's just to live it. And he talks about the need to capture the soul of the business and to absolutely replicate, hardwire, tell the story, breathe it into the business through other people as early as possible, particularly when you're doing this kind of hyper growth of people, because you need other people to tell the story as passionately, as engaging, as authentically as you are, right? And is that something? Is that a big banner that you waved in your career, looking at all the people stuff for big growth businesses?
What I end up spending a lot of time on is the CEO or the head of HR will approach me and say, "How do we keep our culture the same?"
Yeah.
It was going so great when we had 25, 50, 150 people, and now we're dispersed and we're working remotely and it feels different. And how do we stop our culture from changing?
Yeah.
Right. So the connotations there are, it's still control. It's still kind of holding back. And, so I do my best to help educate them that, hey, this is a natural evolution. Like, congratulations on your growth. And more growth, more problems.
Yeah.
And as you grow, those problems evolve. And so explaining the mission, explaining the critical few, helping your broader team to make similar decisions as you would make as CEO founder, boy, that's powerful and pays massive dividends. I do tend to steer a bit away from the really deep vision, mission, values, purpose exercise. I think that a lot of that work ends up going, down the rabbit hole and involves massive teams for, dozens or hundreds of hours. And, ultimately it's the decision makers who need to decide, who are we?
Yeah.
And how should things operate, and take accountability for disseminating that throughout your organization. You can't bubble up culture. The decision makers own it, and that's what culture is. It's how decisions get made. It's who is rewarded, recognized, hired, fired, promoted. You name it. And so, I tend to work with founders and leaders that are at some transition point and helping them understand this is normal. This is okay. Your instincts are probably hurting you. And here's what it looks like around the corner.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I agree to a very large extent with what you just said about that involvement piece, or getting involved in the wormhole that could be vision, values, etc., and purpose. I think the top team has to absolutely set the vision and agenda for that. I think how it gets validated comes through a number of ways in the work that I do. And let's be honest, I haven't scaled up billion-dollar businesses and have no golden parachute of which to jump out of a plane with, right? But my little experience has been that some of those things are about transference of behavior. And I think there's a great amount of work of role modeling and storytelling and all this stuff that the leaders need to do. But the guys on the floor have to sort of like have some belief in it, see that stuff, make it relevant to what actually happens in their day-to-day work. So I think a lot of that stuff ends up getting detached, and has no relevance in someone's day-to-day work. And an element of involvement in that, I think, is really, really useful. But I agree. I think the map has to be determined by the top team. But then they can't just clap themselves on the back, having prepared the map, and go, well, there you go, gang. Over to you. Like you say, everyone needs to see what's happening. They need to see it in real life. It needs to be living.
Well, hey, real talk about culture. Vast majority of organizations, their leader wants it to be air quote good. right? Wants it to be healthy, where people want to work there, people want to work hard. And maybe they'll get engaged in the wordsmithing of what ends up on the wall or the mouse pads or your screensaver. And maybe they don't. So without naming names, I've worked at more than one organization where the CEO said, okay, we just went through a merger. We probably need to communicate values to the organization. Andrew, you're my HR leader. Go help me figure out what those should be. Right? Massive exercise. Okay, salute. Let's go. Yeah, let's pull together the team and let's send out a survey, and we'll have the focus groups and the outcome. And I've seen this repeated with a bunch of organizations I work with. So not just the one experience there. It's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything if the leader doesn't own it authentically.
100%.
And if it doesn't embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly about the reality. Sure, it can be a little bit aspirational. But if you're putting out the pablum of we pay competitively and we embrace diversity and we encourage work-life balance, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Everybody says that. Very few organizations actually do something meaningful around it.
Correct.
It doesn't really describe how your organization operates.
I'd rather you didn't even do the exercise if that's what it's going to be,
Totally agree. Totally agree. If you're not going to do it well and embrace some of the warts, don't do it. It's a waste of time. Your organization has plenty of other things that are probably more valuable to work
100%. 100%. That's definitely my mantra on here. That's only because I get a bit antsy about people just paying lip service to it or chucking the word innovation and integrity into a set of values and thinking it's done. It's not good. Look, I'm interested to dig into your secret formula a bit more, Andrew. So when you're thinking about a successful people focus for dealing with rapid change, how do you break that down? What is the recipe?
Great. And I love how you position this rapid change. Is that applies to rapid growth as well as reaction to a new market dynamic. So it's scaling up or maybe tightening the belt too.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the same recipe.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it starts with have a plan, a people plan, right? You have a business plan, but have a people plan. And, often when you're dealing with rapid change, that's an excuse not to plan. Oh, things are changing so fast. We need to be nimble.
We need to be agile.
Right. Failure to plan is to plan to fail. And that doesn't mean you need a 100-page deck from McKinsey that's out of date before it's ever printed. It should be simple and ready to evolve. But basically, what are the most important things around managing your organization that will help your organization succeed? Far too few organizations spend even a few heartbeats thinking about that question.
And are there, into your mind, some kind of key categories within that plan that, they're the must-haves? You've got to have these things in this plan, or you've got to have thought about certain particulars?
I think commonly you'll have a workforce plan. Mm-hmm. So how many people doing what, often where do I need? Right. So that's something that certainly evolves as dynamics change. Mm-hmm. But that's very closely tied to your expenses and your burn rate and how you organize your recruitment work. So some form of headcount plan or workforce plan is immensely useful, but that's not the plan itself. That's more of an output. Mm-hmm. So, if an organization says we want to expand into Europe, we want to, increase revenue through opening a B2B channel, and we want to improve sales force effectiveness. Great. From a people management perspective, what are the short list of things that directly support those most critical business priorities?
Yeah.
And we HR people often get stuck working on HRE things, right? We come with solutions that are trying to find a problem. Like, oh, I just know that we need a mental health benefit. I've got this great solution. Let's say that can be helpful to our expansion into Europe because ... and it becomes a stretch.
I was going to say, it must be easy to get distracted, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So be really clear about your alignment of your most important people priorities with your most important business priorities. So it starts with having a plan, and then it flows to number 2, ruthlessly prioritize within that plan. So don't bring the solutions that are looking for a problem. Make sure that you're allocating your time and resources and attention appropriately. So that's number 2. Number 1, have a plan. Number 2, ruthlessly prioritize to ensure alignment.
Yeah.
Number 3, I'd say clarity. Clarity is part of the recipe. It's part of the people formula around dealing with rapid change. That means communicate and repeat, set very clear expectations, reinforce those ruthlessly prioritized priorities, reinforce what's most important to the organization, reinforce who should be doing what. Clarity is super important.
Sorry, Andrew, when you're communicating, and I know you say this because I've worked with a few people who came from very different schools as sort of CEOs. One guy was, they don't need to know the why. They just need to know what I want to do. And another guy wanted to really explain the reason behind stuff. Yep. Now, look, I'm kind of more aligned to the second guy, right? Because I think the first question anybody asks, either they've read an announcement or they've walked away from a briefing, is, well, why are we doing that? Right? What's been your experience with that sort of clarity piece?
Yeah, in my book, chapter 1, I talk about these 2 archetypes, kind of tongue in cheek, of the mule driver and the prophet.
Okay.
It may be a little dated. Mule driver. The idea is you have someone who's sitting on the wagon whipping the mules, and they're making all the decisions. They're deciding what direction to go in and how fast. And the mule, so the analogy here is your team is the mules. You might feed them carrots, you might pet them, they might get Evian water, but like you're the taskmaster. That's the mule driver. The other archetype is the prophet, the long flowing white beard coming with the stone tablets, who can attract this crowd of brilliant people around them, and capital, it throws itself at the prophet, but the prophet doesn't like to get their hands dirty, doesn't like to come off the mountain, has a really tough time making tough decisions and executing. So those aren't necessarily on the same axis, but those are 2 really common archetypes of founders.
Yeah.
The person that's kind of doing it all, and the driver, and the big idea visionary who isn't really sure how to get stuff done, but can sure build a great team.
Yeah.
So I think there are risks with both of those archetypes. I think there are real positives to both aspects. Like the mule driver, you're going to get where you're going.
Yeah.
Mules may not be happy, might change out some mules along the way, but you're going to get where you're going. And the prophet, you'll have this motivated, engaged, positive team until they figure out somebody actually needs to break ties and we're not getting anything done. So, I think the message there is you should look for the Goldilocks zone, that happy middle, where you're getting stuff done and you're giving your team enough context that they can, go down the right road.
Yeah. No, it makes sense to me. Especially when you put it that way. So we've got have a plan. We've got ruthlessly prioritize. We've got bring the clarity piece. Anything else to that recipe?
I'd add, again, people formula for dealing with rapid change. Context is king. So just like we talked about the recruitment and selection process at Google during the early days, what works for you is likely to be different than what worked at some big famous brand name company that probably had a very different context than you do. So, just apply some critical thinking to whatever sort of air quote best practices you hear about. Yeah.
Do you, in your experience now of trying to help other businesses, do you see that as a common thing? Someone sitting there either highlighting a Google or a Netflix or a Patagonia or whatever it might be, some kind of hero company, and well, they did that. We should follow that path. Is that something you see often?
Yeah, I think we're in a silver bullet or pharmaceutical culture where we want to take a pill or follow the playbook that will guarantee success. And so did this. LinkedIn did blitz scaling, so we should do blitz scaling. And Netflix did that, so we should do that. I think for dealing with rapid change, rather than applying rapid solutions that aren't well thought through, what I'm encouraging is take a couple of breaths. It'll help you accelerate and map out a really simple plan that has clear, aligned priorities, and apply a light pressure testing of, does this make sense for us? Whatever we're trying to bring from your last company or what you read about over the weekend or your CEO retreat that you went to with the investors, just apply some basic critical thinking of, is this likely to work for our situation?
And when you went through it yourself, and now you've come out, I guess the other side, you've got your plan, you've got your 4 ingredient recipes. What was the toughest lesson you had to learn actually going through it yourself?
Yeah, well, I've led this sort of work a bunch of times, and now I advise companies how to do it themselves. What's often difficult is keeping the list short, is keeping the priorities tight, and the judgment around when to swap a priority out or add one or delete one. And that's as much art as it is science, right? It's judgment. So that's where it can be challenging because new stuff will always pop up.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you wrote a book about it. And what do you want that key takeout for people reading that book to be, Andrew? What's the kind of, for you, the driving message that runs throughout that book?
I think it comes back to, and you opened with this, Andy, be brilliant at the basics. Right? It's not about grabbing some shiny new idea. It's about focus and the boring work of repeatedly communicating priorities and clarity.
Yeah, I love that whole storytelling thing. I found this whole conversation fascinating. It's not a topic we've dived into before in terms of the rapid scale. We've talked about distributed leadership and how things kind of change. It's just really interesting to think about it in this context. And this is going to sound daft, but I still can't get over the way that you describe the definition for hypergrowth. It's really visual for me. That 50% people rise in 12 months. That's quite a staggering image in my head. Enough of my waffling. We've got to the part in the show, my friend, that I call sticky notes. So we are looking for you to summarize all the various things that we've talked about as bits of advice that you could give to my listeners, and they could take them away on 3 little post-it notes. Okay. And then we'll work them up and stick on the Instagram channel and everything will be hunky-dory. So if I was to ask you for your 3 sticky notes in this whole topic of scaling up and getting the best out of your people as you're doing that, what would your pieces of advice be?
All right, 3 sticky notes. So let's keep these short. 3 words for each of the sticky notes. Clarity is critical. Right, that's 1.
Nice.
Self-explanatory. Second, this may need some explanation. Humans have memories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the tech world, and especially in this digital marketing age, there's this concept of test and iterate. Like, oh, we'll try something, and if it doesn't work really well, we'll try something else. And I see I see leaders approach this in the hybrid work environment. Okay, go home. Okay, come back for 2 days. Okay, go home again. People with lives outside of work crave reliability. They want to know how to take care of their childcare situation or their commute or their home office or whatever. They don't want policies jumping around on them all the time. And you can very quickly breed cynicism within your workforce if you're jumping around with your management practices all the time. Okay, we're going to do a performance review that has 5 factors, or no, we're just going to do monthly check-ins, or humans have memories. And so that just reinforces the idea about being thoughtful about your management practices and not going too far down the path of testing and iterating.
And your third, sir?
My third, authenticity builds trust.
Nice.
So that ties back to our culture conversation around like, hey, embrace the warts. We are who we are. We know that our founder CEO has certain ways of working and ways of operating. And boy, we're hoping that they develop and grow with time. But own it. Don't just drop meaningless commentary to your organization. If you're doing too much PR, corporate speak internally, your team's going to tune it out and not believe you. And so be authentic, build trust. That helps with clarity, alignment, and productivity.
Thank you, Andrew. 3 smashing sets of sticky notes there. I look forward to sticking those on the Instagram account later on. Andrew, look, we've run out of time, but I would just like to say thank you so much for that conversation. I found that fascinating. And look, thank you so much for battling COVID to come here today, talk to me, and provide some really stimulating material for my listeners. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully my audio comes through as I mute myself as I cough. But boy, great conversation, insightful questions. Just really hope that this is helpful for your audience.
I'm sure it will be, my friend. Thank you very much, and you take care. Okay, everyone, that was Andrew Bartlow. And if you'd like to find out a bit more about him and some of the topics that we've talked about, please check out the show notes. So, that concludes today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and heard something maybe that will help you become a stickier, more successful business from the inside going forwards. If you have, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Andy Goram, and you've been listening to the Sticky from the Inside podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.